I remember that morning like it was branded into my memory because in a way it was just a normal Saturday in Austin. Quiet, a little humid, sun already creeping through the blinds. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in my gym shorts, scrolling through my phone, sipping cold coffee that Lauren had brewed hours earlier. The dog was asleep at my feet. One of those mornings where the world feels still. Familiar. Then I saw it. An Instagram story from Lauren. She'd posted it maybe 40 minutes before. Ladies' rooftop dinner. Much needed unwind time, 2 heart sparkles. Read the caption. The little geotag was the Archer Hotel downtown. Rooftop, string lights, cocktails, and a long table with wine glasses clinking. I tapped the sound on. Just ambient music and laughter in the background. Innocent enough. But something felt off. At first, I thought it was just my brain being paranoid. We'd been distant lately, yeah. But that happens. You go through cycles in a marriage. Still, I couldn't shake it. So I replayed the story. Slower. Then I paused it. That's when I saw it. A reflection in the glass behind her. Blurry, faint, but clear enough if you knew what to look for. A man. Clean-shaven. Collared shirt. Baby blue rolled-up sleeves. He was leaning in toward her, just out of frame. If you didn't pause it, you wouldn't notice. But I did, because I'd seen that shirt before. Tyler Brooks. That same shirt, he'd worn it to the company benefit last quarter. He made a whole joke about how he spilled shrimp cocktail on it, but still wore it because it brought in deals. I didn't even like the guy. Too slick. Too charming in that try-hard way. But Lauren insisted he was harmless. Annoying, even. Office flirt, she used to call him. Not my type. You've got nothing to worry about. And I believed her. Until that moment. I leaned closer, squinting at my phone, and noticed something else. On the table in front of them, 2 hotel keycards. Side by side. Stacked like a couple would do if they checked in together. And next to them, a receipt. She hadn't angled the camera to show it, but it must have slipped into the frame. I paused again and brightened the screen. Romantic set for 2. That's what it said. I sat there, frozen, rereading it over and over, as if I could convince myself it meant something else. Maybe it was a package deal. Maybe the hotel just named it that for marketing. But I knew better. Something turned cold inside me. That subtle, creeping sense of something unraveling. Like stepping off a curb you didn't know was there. An hour later, the story disappeared. No explanation. No follow-up. Just gone. Then a new post popped up. Same rooftop, but framed closer. This time, the table was cropped out, and the angle made it impossible to see any reflections. The caption had changed too. Corporate bonding. Team synergy never sleeps, briefcase sparkles. Comments? Turned off. Lauren always left her comments on. She lived for the feedback. Emoji chains from coworkers. Friends complimenting her dress. Followers asking where the earrings were from. Always polished. Always curated. This was different. This was controlled. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. When she came home later that night, I was still trying to process it. She walked through the door like nothing had happened. Still in her sleek black jumpsuit. Makeup perfect, phone in one hand, little clutch purse in the other. She kissed me on the cheek and dropped her heels by the door. Dinner was cute, she said. Gina brought that same wine from the Napa trip. So good. I tried to sound casual. Yeah? Looked like a fun rooftop. She glanced at me, smiled. Oh, did I post something? I don't even remember. That was her move lately, disarm with charm. Play it like she was just floating through her day. Careless, harmless. But I noticed the flicker in her eyes. She knew what she posted. I leaned back against the counter. I saw a reflection in the glass. Looked like Tyler was there. She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that? He dropped by for 5 minutes with Marissa. Didn't even sit. I didn't think it was worth mentioning. You posted it as a girls' night. She tilted her head, casually defensive. Well, it was a girls' night. Just because a couple of coworkers passed through doesn't change that. I nodded slowly. You know the receipt on the table said romantic set for 2, right? That stopped her. For half a second. Then she laughed. Not a real one of those airy, dismissive laughs she used in meetings when someone said something too stupid to deserve a real reply. "You're looking way too hard," she said. "That's just what the hotel calls the dinner package. It's a fixed menu thing. Everyone was splitting it. 2 hotel keys." Her eyes narrowed a fraction. "That's not what it looked like. I think your brain is just distorting things. Distorting things." I swallowed the words forming in my throat. The frustration, the disbelief, the sudden, sharp realization that she wasn't trying to explain. She was trying to control the narrative. "You trust me, right?" she asked, softer now, leaning against the kitchen island like she was just tired. "Ben, come on. Don't let your imagination get the best of you." I didn't answer. I just stared at her, studied her. She wasn't afraid. She was rehearsed. I said I had some work to finish up and went upstairs. Sat at my desk, staring at nothing for a long time. My hands were still resting on the keyboard when I realized I'd been frozen for nearly 15 minutes. That was the first crack. The exact second something inside me shifted from assuming the best to preparing for the worst. Because once you see a lie dressed up as a half-truth, you don't unsee it. You start noticing other things. You start remembering. The phone she started leaving face down all the time. The passwords that suddenly stopped working on our shared apps. The business trips that were packed with meetings, yet somehow included spa reservations and wine tastings. Little things I'd brushed off. Until now. And what scared me most wasn't the suspicion. It was how good she was at covering it. After that rooftop story, something in me snapped. Quietly but undeniably. Not like a movie moment with shouting or accusations. Just a slow, relentless current pulling me under. I started noticing everything. Not just noticing, cataloging. Like my brain had flipped into some forensic mode I didn't know I had. Because now I couldn't unsee. Her phone, for instance, always face down. She used to leave it lying around without a second thought. Now it followed her like a shadow. Bathroom, closet, laundry room, always locked. And the password? Changed. Twice in 2 weeks. I'd ask casually, "Hey, what's the passcode again? I want to queue up the playlist in the car." And she'd just shrug and say, "Oh, I switched it. I'll do it, babe." And grab it from me with that smooth, practiced smile. "Protecting client info," she said once, like that explained everything. Sure. Then there were the weekends. She started calling them wellness resets. Yoga retreats, spa escapes, nature getaways. Always timed with work trips. Always non-refundable. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But when the same hotel appeared on our joint statement 2 weekends in a row, listed under her business card's overflow fund, I started keeping tabs. There was one charge from the first trip that stuck with me. Starlight Lounge, room tab, 12:48 a.m. We were on the same family plan, so I checked her Apple location history. She'd said she went to bed early that night. "No point in staying up when you're the only sober one," she texted. But the map showed her walking a good half-mile down the road after midnight, then circling back around the hotel entrance 30 minutes later. I didn't bring it up. I just filed it away. Every time she left town, I'd find something else. A bar tab, a room service bill. One time, a $29 charge for valet, at a hotel nowhere near her conference. Another time, her car wasn't even parked at the airport she flew from. The parking pass for her usual downtown garage showed in and out entries late Friday night. Then again Sunday morning, even though she swore she flew straight back from Chicago. I once asked why she never wore her wedding ring on trips. She laughed. "Oh God, it's not that deep," she said, brushing her fingers together like it was dust. "I just forget. Happens all the time." But it didn't. Not before. At our last family dinner, she showed up wearing a sleek black outfit, hair curled, nails perfect. She looked amazing, honestly, except she also looked single. No ring. And when my sister nudged her about it, jokingly, over wine, Lauren smiled and said, "Ben knows I'm taken, don't you, babe?" And leaned in for a quick kiss. Like it was a game. Like the omission was part of the mystique. I smiled back. I even laughed. But something about that moment sat in my chest like a stone. She looked too comfortable playing both parts, the loyal wife in public, the unattached executive in private. And it wasn't just the absence of the ring. It was the tone shift in her voice when she answered work calls on speaker, low, soft, warm in a way she never used to be. It was the way she got dressed for networking dinners, as if every outfit had to hit the sweet spot between boardroom and date night. It was the way she started saying things like, "I'm just in a different season of growth right now," or, "I need people around me who match my energy." Like we were coworkers, not a married couple. There was this one night that really drove it home. She came back late, past 11. Claimed the client dinner had run long, traffic was terrible, blah blah blah. I nodded, didn't push it. She went upstairs, kicked off her heels, and went straight to the shower. 20 minutes later, she came down in sweats, all casual and domestic, like nothing happened. But I'd seen her calendar earlier. I wasn't snooping. I just happened to be signed into the shared iPad we used for groceries and reminders. I opened her Google Calendar out of habit. No dinner was scheduled. Just a block labeled, personal/self-time. And yet, she'd come home with perfectly redone lipstick. That night, I lay awake beside her, listening to the steady sound of her breathing. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning in circles. Part of me kept asking if I was crazy, if I was seeing ghosts. But the rest of me, the part that had watched that rooftop story over and over again, knew the truth already. I was not crazy. I was being managed. The thing about betrayal isn't just the act. It's the cover-up. It's the gaslight. The subtle way someone rewrites reality and makes you doubt your own intuition. Every time I asked something too directly, she'd pivot. Every time I brought up something small, timing, a charge, a missing detail, she'd flip it back on me. "Ben, do you hear yourself? You're acting paranoid." Or, "I can't keep being interrogated every time I leave the house. Is this the kind of marriage we're in now?" Once, when I showed her a bill from a wine bar she swore she didn't visit, she stared at it, dead-eyed, then smiled. "Oh, they must have charged my card by mistake. I'll call them Monday." She never did. Or if she did, the charge stayed. I watched for weeks. She never brought it up again. I started talking less, asking less. But not because I believed her, because I wanted her to feel unchallenged, to think I'd backed off. I hadn't. I was building a timeline, quietly, thoughtfully. Her wellness weekends, her changed passwords, the trips, the receipts, the outfit shifts, the tone in her voice, the missing ring, her social posts, strategically vague captions, perfectly curated group photos where she stood just far enough from anyone to make it look casual. But I noticed Tyler in more and more of them. In the background, in the corner, always just enough to remain deniable. And then one day, I noticed something else. On one of her ladies-only weekends, Lauren posted a boomerang of a champagne glass clink. It was quick, maybe half a second long. But in that half second, the camera caught a blink of a male wrist wearing a braided leather bracelet. I knew that bracelet. Tyler wore it to her company's summer party. I **t it, zoomed in, and saved it in a hidden folder. Later that night, she came home tipsy, looser, glowing. She curled up next to me on the couch and asked if I wanted to plan a fall getaway. Just us. Her head on my shoulder. Like nothing had changed. Like we were still us. I said, "Sure," and kissed her forehead. But something inside me had already shifted past repair. Because a chain of suspicions only has to grow long enough before it becomes a noose. And deep down, I knew she wasn't going to stop. Not unless someone made her. There's a moment when suspicion crosses into certainty, where everything inside you goes still. It was a Tuesday, late September, and I had just gotten home from a client dinner in Round Rock. I'd stayed later than I meant to, talking numbers with a team that wouldn't stop ordering drinks. Lauren wasn't home. She'd said she had a team offsite wrap-up and might crash at Marissa's if they finished late. I didn't even flinch at the lie this time. I walked through the front door, greeted by the familiar hum of silence. The house was dark except for the small foyer light she always left on. I set my bag down, loosened my tie, and instinctively checked the security app on my phone. Just a habit, I told myself. But the timeline caught my eye. At 10:11 p.m., the smart lock had opened using the Guest 2 code. I froze. There were only 3 user codes programmed into our front door. Mine, Lauren's, and Guest 2, the one we used for the dog sitter when we traveled, or for her parents when they visited. Except we hadn't used it in months. My stomach tightened. I clicked the entry. It showed a 22-minute window between unlocking and relocking. Then I checked the doorbell camera. And there it was, grainy but clear enough. The image loaded slowly, but when it did, I felt my blood turn cold. Lauren, dressed in the same white blazer she wore in her morning selfie, standing at the door, laughing, and beside her, Tyler Brooks. They were facing each other, his hand on her lower back, as she fumbled with the lock. He said something that made her laugh again. Head back, relaxed, like she was exactly where she wanted to be. Then she let him in. No hesitation, just familiarity. They were inside for 22 minutes. No luggage, no meeting notes, no signs of work. And then, like a scripted scene, the door opened again. Tyler stepped out first, fixing his collar. She followed, brushing her hair behind her ears. They didn't kiss. They didn't hug. But the way they moved, unrushed, practiced, told me everything. You don't fumble through guest codes with someone you barely know. You don't enter your marital home with a colleague and leave before midnight unless there's something to hide. And Lauren? She never looked at the doorbell cam once, because she knew exactly where it was. I stared at the screen for a long time after the video ended. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, watching it loop, the frame slowly tightening around the death of something I couldn't unsee. The next morning, she waltzed into the kitchen like always, hair still damp from the shower, wearing that gray robe I bought her last Christmas. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my dinner went. I told her it was fine. She poured coffee like nothing had changed, made eggs, played music. She even danced a little while scrambling them, humming along to a Fleetwood Mac song that now feels ruined forever. I watched her move around our kitchen, so effortlessly at home in the same space she'd brought someone else into. That's when I knew I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not directly. Because if she could lie to my face this smoothly, then she was deeper into this than I ever thought. And confronting her would only teach her to hide better. No, I needed more than a fight. I needed the whole picture. So I started digging. First, I downloaded the full smart lock history from the app's online portal. 6 months of entries, exits, timestamps. I created a spreadsheet, marked every time Guest 2 was used, for times total, all on nights when she said she was out with the girls or working late. Then I checked our Apple HomeKit logs. Every time someone used Siri to dim the lights, adjust the music, lower the temperature, there it was, activity during hours she wasn't supposed to be home. I compared it all to her calendar, her expense reports, the hotel bills on our joint account. Patterns began to emerge, almost elegant in how carefully they were layered. Then came the hotel receipt. A 2-night stay at Hotel Interlude, downtown. She'd booked it for a wellness leadership retreat. It included a spa package, champagne service, and a note in the billing summary that caught my eye. Couples package executive suite. I called the hotel pretending to be her assistant, asking for clarification on the charges for Lauren Pierce. The woman on the phone paused, then kindly said, "Yes, Ms. Pierce and Mr. Brooks were very pleasant guests. Would you like an itemized receipt?" I declined. That was all I needed. She had stopped hiding. Not from the world, just from me. I started screen recording her stories, saving **TS of any blurry background that might capture a face, a hand, a drink placed just off frame. Once, her post showed a wine glass set across from her own. Identical entree plates, matching cloth napkins. But only her name was tagged. No group photo, no colleagues. I found the restaurant's tagged photos. And there he was, Tyler, standing with the hostess in a reposted boomerang from the same night. Same clothes, same timestamp, Another puzzle piece dropped into place. It all clicked when I remembered something she once told me during a fight, back when we were still trying. She said, "You see what you want to see, Ben. You think being careful means being right." At the time, I thought it was an insult. Now it was a confession. And I didn't just want to be right anymore. I wanted to be prepared. So I compiled everything. Every receipt, every **T, every video clip. I stored them in a hidden folder titled Q3 Taxes. Something boring enough she'd never open it. Then I printed the guest logs, labeled the smart lock entries, and backed up the footage to an encrypted drive. I created a paper trail, a timeline, a story she didn't know she'd already told. The undeniable evidence wasn't just a single smoking G**N. It was all of it. The cumulative weight of 100 tiny cuts, finally deep enough to bleed me dry. One night, she fell asleep early. I walked past our bedroom door and saw her phone light up on the nightstand. A message from Tyler. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. I already knew how this ended. By the time I had the full picture, timestamps, receipts, footage, I wasn't even angry anymore. There was no adrenaline, no sick rush of discovery. Just this sharp, freezing calm that settled into me like winter moving into the bones. She had made her choices. Now it was my turn. We built Pierce and Blake Advisory together. I brought the structure, processes, operations, long-term scalability. Lauren brought the charm, branding, pitch decks, investor relations. She called herself the face of the firm, and she wasn't wrong. But it was my steady hand that kept the wheels from flying off. Back in the early days, when it was just the two of us and a half-furnished WeWork space, we drafted the founding charter late one night over takeout. Between bites of pad thai and sips of cheap wine, I'd written a clause. Something dry and legalese that she skimmed and waved off. It was called the Reputational Risk Contingency Clause. She never paid it much attention. Too busy sketching out marketing funnels and prepping pitch slides. But I remembered it. It was buried in the original charter long before our merger with the Blake Group, before the brand refresh, before we were appearing in Forbes as Austin's next power couple in consulting. It gave either founding partner the right to initiate a protective takeover in the event of substantiated behavior likely to cause material reputational harm to the firm's standing or key partnerships. Lauren always laughed at the legal sections. She called them Ben's bedtime stories. But I made sure they stayed in every iteration, every rebranding, every structural change. Just in case. I called Owen Blake the next morning. He was the other original partner. Lauren had forced him out 3 years ago in what she called a strategic refocusing. Translation. She iced him out, made him look irrelevant, and pushed through a board vote to buy his shares at a fraction of their value. Owen picked up after 2 rings. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year. "Ben?" he said cautiously. I didn't waste time. "I need to know if the RRC clause survived the last charter amendment." He paused. "You mean the reputational clause?" "Yeah." He gave a small, dry laugh. "Of course it did. You were always the only one who understood the long game." I told him I needed confirmation in writing. He said he'd forward the archived versions of the documents. 30 minutes later, I had them, digitally signed, time-stamped, and still enforceable. She never knew. Lauren had spent the last 2 years chasing glossy investor decks and thought leadership panels. But she hadn't touched the structural backbone of the company since she pushed Owen out. That was her blind spot. She thought power came from visibility. But real power? It lives in the shadows, in clauses and contingencies and lines she never bothered to read. I didn't go nuclear that day. I started with subtle moves. First, I requested a confidential compliance audit. Standard protocol, triggered internally, no external alerts. I flagged it under potential ethical conflicts related to executive conduct. Then I reached out to legal counsel and requested an ethics review briefing, citing emerging concerns tied to leadership behavior and fiduciary risk. Still internal. Still quiet. The board received the meeting invite later that week. Subject line: Emergency Ethics Review, Leadership Assessment. I left out names. For now. In parallel, I began preparing the PR team. Nothing direct. Just some early messaging drafts on the importance of ethical leadership, internal accountability, and corporate integrity. I framed it as a proactive branding initiative. Lauren would have eaten it up if she knew. Meanwhile, her posts got bolder. Lauren and Tyler were still dancing on the edge of visibility. A weekend trip off-grid that just happened to be tagged at a wine resort. A photo of Tyler's dog on her Instagram story, cropped, but unmistakable. Captions like, "No better way to reset than with real one's yellow heart," and "Grateful for the humans who keep me grounded." I didn't flinch. She'd already told the world everything I needed them to know. All I had to do was let the puzzle assemble itself. Then came the final push. A week before the board meeting, Lauren walked into a company cocktail party, held at the office, post-quarter celebration, and made a speech. I wasn't there, but I heard about it. She raised a glass of champagne, smiled for the cameras, and declared how independence is the core of my leadership style. She thanked her team for trusting her vision, and finished by announcing she was finally stepping into full alignment, personally and professionally. Then, according to 3 different people, she turned to Tyler, gave him a wink, and said, "No more hiding." The room clapped. I didn't. That night, she came home late, smelling like wine and confidence. She didn't speak to me, just walked upstairs, heels clacking down the hall, and left her purse by the guest room door. An hour later, I received a text from her. "I think we need space. Let's not drag this out. I'll handle the narrative. You do what you need to." I didn't respond. The next morning, I packed a single bag, walked out the front door, and never looked back. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd finally broken free from the husband she'd outgrown, stepped into her full self, found the man who matched her ambition. And for a few days, maybe that illusion held, until the mechanisms started triggering. First, her corporate credit card was declined. Mid-lunch with a venture partner, she brushed it off as a glitch. Then she was locked out of the strategic planning database. She called IT. They told her access had been revoked pending review. A day later, she received notice of a temporary suspension from executive chat channels due to an ongoing investigation tied to ethical conduct concerns. Her personal assistant was quietly reassigned. Her calendar, wiped of all meetings marked confidential or board level. She didn't know it yet, but the board had been given access to the evidence. Clean, time-stamped, cross-referenced. The hotel footage, the door lock logs, the expense overlaps, the social tags, the ethics clause. It wasn't about the affair. It was about the risk. It was about using company assets to sustain a personal entanglement that compromised decision-making, opened the firm to litigation, and jeopardized existing contracts with clients who had strict morality clauses. The board didn't care who she slept with. They cared about exposure. Lauren had cultivated her image like a brand, precision-curated, endlessly retouched, perfectly lit. But she didn't see the shadows creeping behind her spotlight. And by the time she realized the lights were being shut off, one by one, it was already too late. There's something terrifying about silence when you're used to being applauded. That's what she felt first, the quiet. Not a scandal. Not an email. Just absence. Sudden and strategic. She didn't know that I'd met with the compliance liaison the morning after I left the house. She didn't know that the documents had been submitted, annotated, indexed, timestamped. She didn't know that her quote-unquote independence speech had been cited verbatim as Exhibit 4B in the board presentation. But she started to sense it. The day after her assistant was reassigned, the corporate celebration photo, where she clinked glasses with Tyler in front of the company's name, was quietly removed from the internal portal. A junior brand manager flagged it, said it conflicted with visual guidelines. She reposted it on her personal account later that night with the caption, "Let them talk. I'm living." And talk they did. Quietly, carefully. The marketing team started referring inquiries to legal. HR scheduled anonymous interviews. PR stopped looping her into draft reviews. The line between leadership and liability was beginning to blur, and she was too proud to notice. The board had seen the evidence. All of it. Her hotel stays cross-referenced with company travel claims. 2 sets of keycards for single occupancy rooms, gift receipts logged under consulting reimbursements, and the clincher, client feedback expressing concerns over visible boundary erosion between senior executives and junior staff. No names, of course, but everyone knew who. The mechanism was already moving. The ethics review was scheduled, not discussed. Her access to high-sensitivity documents was temporarily limited pending review. She was locked out of the pitch archives, the investor pipeline CRM, and the legacy asset folders I had set up years ago. A notification went out. Reminder: all executives are required to comply with updated ethical review protocols. Pending review, discretionary use of company resources is suspended. She replied within minutes. I'm the face of this company. Who authorized this? Ben doesn't speak for me. She never got an answer, because I didn't speak for her. The policy did. The board did. And Owen? The man she humiliated and cast out like a surplus department? He was the one who introduced the motion to trigger the clause in full. By that Friday, her corporate card had been permanently disabled. Her access badge, once all access, now beeped red at the glass elevator that led to the executive wing. The receptionist offered her a visitor tag. She laughed. You're kidding. But they weren't. A statement had been drafted in her absence. Polished. Non-accusatory. It read, in our continued pursuit of upholding ethical leadership and the highest standard of transparency, Pearson Blake has initiated an internal review of executive practices. We remain committed to trust and integrity at all levels. She wasn't mentioned, but she didn't need to be. The message was clear. I watched from a distance, quietly, methodically, while the life she built on image began to evaporate. Tyler was quietly removed from team rosters. His badge flagged inactive. His bio on the website redirected to a 404-page. She still hadn't grasped how deep the mechanism went. Lauren always assumed that if the lights were still on and the cameras were still rolling, she still had the stage. But behind the scenes, the board had already taken action. A temporary freeze on her equity draws. A motion to pause profit sharing. An investigation into misallocated funds from the Q2 wellness retreat, which, as it turned out, she charged to a client-facing development budget. And as the framework came down around her, she did what she always did when threatened. She posted long captions about resilience, hashtagged affirmations about rebirth and self-worth. She uploaded a video of herself walking barefoot through a vineyard at golden hour, voiceover saying, sometimes, stepping away from the noise is how you find your clarity. In truth, she was being stepped over. I heard from a mutual friend that she'd started making calls, testing the waters, hinting at being in transition. She pitched it like a sabbatical, stepping back to realign priorities. But most of her former allies had already distanced themselves. Clients were wary. Investors were cold. Her mentor, one she used to name-drop in every keynote, declined to be quoted in support. No one wanted to be pulled into the gravity of her fall. Meanwhile, the final clause of the takeover process was triggered. Ownership review. Her shares were locked pending the outcome of the ethics investigation. Her voting rights suspended. The board, now chaired by Owen, initiated a revaluation of controlling interest, based not just on executive performance but on fiduciary exposure. I received a call that week from the general counsel. He asked if I would consider assuming interim oversight. To maintain continuity, of course. I said I'd think about it. Lauren tried one final power move. She emailed the board. All of them. She invoked her history, her visibility, her contribution to the company's public rise. She hinted that ousting her would signal instability to investors. That removing a female co-founder in today's climate was a PR nightmare. She offered to step back voluntarily for optics, but insisted on retaining control behind the scenes. She received no reply. 2 days later, the final emergency session was held. She wasn't invited. She found out through her assistant, who, by then, wasn't her assistant anymore. By the following Monday, she was locked out of all remaining systems. No calendar, no email, no Slack, just a formal notice on her personal account. Thank you for your leadership. As of date, You are no longer authorized to represent Pierce and Blake Advisory in any official capacity. Final documentation will be provided under separate cover. She drove to the office that morning, still trying to bluff her way through the receptionist, only to find her nameplate removed, her credentials invalid, and a stack of boxes waiting in the front lobby. When she asked for anyone, no one came, because the mechanism wasn't designed for confrontation. It was designed for removal, efficient, legal, unavoidable. She returned home in silence, except it wasn't home anymore, because while she had been posturing and posting, the deed transfer on the house had already gone through. The property, purchased under my LLC for asset protection reasons, had been reassigned. She hadn't read the fine print. I had, and when she turned the key and it no longer fit, she stood there for a long time, alone on the porch, phone in hand, locked out of everything she thought was hers. That was the true mechanism. Not revenge, not rage, just the quiet, total undoing of her illusion. And I didn't need to raise my voice. I only needed to raise the mirror.